I'll start.
Starting. I got it on.
Thanks, Wayne. That worked.
All right.
Really.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to this meeting of the Cromwell Community Board. Welcome to our submitters who are here to speak today and to our elected members. We've got Mary and Neil who are both joining us online, so they are in attendance at the meeting, but we just can't quite see them here at the moment. Welcome to council staff and to the media who are present today. Let's get ourselves straight in to apologies for today. And we have an apology from Bob. Lucky Bob is in Japan.
Oh, is he?
Oh,
Wonderful. Nice.
So he is having an overseas holiday at the moment, and I'm sure that he will be having a wonderful time. Japan this time of year is wet as well, so he might not be having dry weather either. So can I have a mover and a second as Bob's apology, please?
Yeah.
That was Cheryl and Sarah. Thank you. And that takes us to the confirmation of the minutes on page 7 of your agenda. These are the minutes. Doesn't seem like very long ago that we were together. They're only from the 8th of May. Is there any discussion around the minutes, or I call for a mover and a second of that? Yeah. Oh. That takes us to page 13. The mover was Sarah, seconder. Wally, thank you. Page 13, all in favour. Always forget that.
Aye.
Thank you. That takes us to page 13 and a reminder to of the need to be vigilant and stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between your role as a member and any private or other external interests that you may have. And of course, attached to the agenda is that list of those declarations of interest that members have made. And then that takes us to our next item, which is 23.4.2 on page 16 of your agenda, which is to listen to our annual plan submitters that wish to be heard. And we have 2 annual plan submitters with us today, with Gordon Stewart and David George both here to speak to their submissions. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming and taking the time to speak with us. And I have Gordon first up on my agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. I did send you all a note, because one other time I submitted an annual plan and I don't seem to get it in the right place. So this way, they stole what I was talking about. It's a pretty similar submission to what I might have made a year or 2 back in the past. The first one was with respect to the council and the last part of Sandflat Road. I think it would be appropriate for the community board to make a contribution, because I imagine the transit is not making many at the moment, and get that completed, because it is a major linkage road between, and as I've tried to point out, it links the significant tourist attractions of Mrs. Jones's fruit stall and the motorsport park with the with Bannockburn Winery and now the bike track. A lot of traffic on it, often in very poor condition. It's in good condition now because the rain sort of settles it down. It is also a major bypass road for Bannockburn traffic going north, east, missing out the centre of Cromwell. It would be significant for you because you own one half of the road, one side of the road, and I know from my real estate days the added value that steel made to a property was phenomenal. So you get an overall benefit on it. During the period from 1990 to 2005, I'll pass this list around, the council did seal these roads itself in this board, because the councils at the time were very strong on getting seal extended. It's a major attraction for ratepayers, benefit for ratepayers. Some of the roads were done through private funding, Ben Cottage Road was a classic example where I managed to get the neighbours up there to all contribute, made up the 50% share that the council didn't want to do, and we've got some transit money to do the rest. Private funding is also used on Hall Road to get the Darcy extended, so it wouldn't be out of line for you people to contribute to the council's fund to get that done. That was item number 1. In the past, the board developed a biking track between Lynn Lane and Schoolhouse Road. The Campbell family had asked long-term residents of Annington and Cromwell. They had asked me about getting a road named after their predecessor. That wasn't possible because we already have a Campbell Road in Central Otago. But I had made a suggestion to them that this track be called the Campbell track, because it's where their uncle, in this case, Lieutenant Colin Campbell, would have walked to school. He was lost in the war over Europe. This Annette Napier, a niece of Colin, she wrote to the community board twice and never had a reply. This was rather rude, but she did give me a story of the Campbell's background in this district, 7 generations. At the moment, the track has one little sign on saying 2 metres apart because it's COVID related, during COVID time. I think that's something you could look at. The track is not mentioned in your Cromwell brochure, yet the locals know it's there. And seeing I was on tracks, there's also a public walking and biking easement from Loban Valley up to Sugarloaf Drive, which is privately owned, past the old deer strip around Denby's Orchard, back down to Clark Road. Now this isn't identified and isn't shown on the brochure either. The appropriate time to the landowner up there, I don't think it's been particularly helpful towards this, but it's an obligation that he's got to wear. He's got a submission in for further subdivision at the moment, so it's appropriate time to get the location of this liability on his property established a little bit stronger, and maybe get signs and marker posts and things along the road. Again, not a lot of expense, and perhaps Rotary Alliance and some other promotion group might step in. But my main reason for being here was the way this community board has completely ignored the Lakes Equestrian Club, which is your committee managing your biggest reserve, the biggest club reserve away from Dockland and Central Otago, the racecourse, the 90 hectares out there. And there's an error on my statement number 4. It's 2019, not 2014, that the board approached the Equestrian Club approached the community board about support and establishing a water bore, which the Central Lakes Club had already spent 35,000 in improving and testing and getting the permits. The bore's there. We've also had a design made up on how this water could be used on the course. So I made 4 different submissions and come in 4 different hats, shouldn't I? But this is the critical one. The decision at the time was that we needed a 10-year plan. Within a year, this green book was produced by Jerry Emmett and distributed. The spot was nil. Further action was generated by the Equestrian Club, and we were told that your reserve plan had expired. In fact, it expired 15 years ago. We're still 3 years on and nothing's happened because apparently some of your staff members have left, and so that's been just put in abeyance. We have a real problem out there with lack of water. And I think one of the ways you could look at it, because I see the chairman's asking me to hurry up. Our problem with water is that we have a 6 hectare allocation for a 90 hectare reserve. And that's fine when it's raining. But you've got Susan behind her. She's got a 6 hectare block. She's got a 6 hectare allocation too. We can't put 6 hectares of water into 90. And that's where this has got to come.
It's a very complex issue, as
No, it's pretty straightforward. There's even the possibility that a few folks.
I need to wrap you up because we are quite a long way over that time frame. But yeah,
I want you to consider an interest-free loan. The reserve is generating 20,000 money available each year that we can spend on things. And we can pay that loan back over a period of 10 to 15 years.
Thanks for your time. Has anyone got questions or comments for Gordon on his submissions? There's a full response to each of the items that you have had on your submissions, which give you some update as to where some of those things have got to and what the issues might be that are holding those up. And I understand from the Equestrian Club perspective that this is an easy equation, that this is land that you would like to water for this purpose.
It's your land.
It is reserved land, and there's quite a lot of work going on in the background about land use around reserves at the moment. So I think that some of that will inform that work.
4 years is a poor performance from you. It's the first application was made 4 years ago.
Madam Chair, I've got a question, please.
Yes, certainly.
Mr. Stewart, have you seen the staff response to your submissions?
No. Shall
Yeah, that's unhelpful, unfortunately. But there is a response that's in the agenda to the submissions that you've made. And my second question, I can't ask the second question I had in response to that. If you had, well, I was going to ask you what you thought of the response, but you haven't seen it, so you can't answer that question. Did I hear you correctly to say that on the Shore property there's an easement that goes down to Clark Road? Because if there is, I think you need to give someone some further details about that, because I'm not aware of such easement going to Clark Road.
Well, yes, I understand so.
No, I'm pretty sure there's not. So maybe it would be useful.
Certainly goes around the property of a farmer up there.
Yeah, but it comes back to the south, I believe, and down the road. But I don't think it goes to Clark Road. But if you've got something about that would be useful to be passed on, because I'm not aware of it, and I have got the survey map. I've got the survey maps in front of me, so I'm pretty sure there isn't one going to Clark Road.
It would come back to the public reserve land on the face of the sugar lights. It runs around Denby's orchard.
Yeah, okay. Not according to the survey plans, but that'll be something I'm sure the staff can follow up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your time. David.
I think can I table these?
Sure.
Just here. If something came up, so I've got a brief submission and then a longer one. First one is pretty self-explanatory for the Lowburn Anzac Day service. Flagpoles. I've had a discussion with Lowburn leaders to propose to shift the flagpole at Lowburn Hall and to add 2 new flagpoles. I know it'll take 18 months in the pipeline and get the funding and stuff, but and of course needs council approval. At the bottom, to put it at the bottom end of the playground, where there's a metal sculpture that was donated by a local resident. It was proposed to create more space for Anzac Day observances and to provide space for those who cannot fit into the hall. One advantage of this arrangement is that local young people will gain experience raising and lowering the flags of New Zealand, Australia and Turkey. We expect to provide our own flags by donation. We need to move forward and actively engage with the young in this ceremony. I've been delegated by the Cromwell RSA to deal with the Lowburn service for a number of years. And at our last meeting last Thursday, said just go ahead and do the paperwork yourself. So I've done that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second one relates to the proposed museum down on Melbourne Terrace. The background to this is that originally the museum was down in the old Athenaeum Hall, down on Main Street. Most of us wanted a museum combined with Old Cromwell, as you know, together. But at the time, the local authority decided to put the museum up here in the mall, to get people to come into the mall. And so it's here, now it's going to go back down under the master plan. And there's might be there's going to be a strategy to move this on. Regarding the proposed museum cafe, which is on the plans, There are 3 cafes nearby at the Heritage Precinct. The precinct is run by volunteers on a break-even basis. A 4th cafe may well compromise all 4 operations. In my view, and as a community worker, I was trained in this, that it's unethical for one community-funded resource to compete with another. And I think this needs due consideration. If the Cromwell Heritage Precinct runs into difficulties and the volunteers leave, then the ratepayer may be left to pick up the pieces, maybe have to fund salaried workers or wage workers. A good business plan for any proposed museum will consider these factors, in my view. Relationship of new museum to Cromwell Historic Precinct. Cromwell Heritage Precinct is publicly funded. It includes McNulty House, a print shop, Blacklist shop, Logan Cottage, Carbon Co, Bayron's Barn, stables and other features. It has been rooted and supported by Chinese members of the Otago community. They have a replica of a Chinese merchant close to Old Cromwell. I'm assuming they'll go in conjunction with the Chinatown proposals, and it'll probably be somewhere opposite Victoria Arms Hotel in that vicinity. This is supported by Denise Singh, the daughter of Dr. Jermaine, the noted historian. There are other items and initiatives in and around Old Cromwell on the pipeline. There's plenty of space and room down there. There's room down there for an archive and for storage, out of sight. They've got a lot of surplus area down there. Now, in my view, and according to one primary member, they would welcome that and to join forces with the museum with an archive and storage. They have archives and they have antiques and bits and pieces themselves, and they would probably pay them to join forces and to have the same facilities. The proposed cinema space in the new museum. The proposed new museum off Mount Hall Terrace includes provision of a cinema. In my view, modern cinemas should, in my view, modern museums should, at the very least, have flat screens for information display, state of the art. However, the Otago Goldfields Heritage Trust has a cinema in Donald Street in the same general area. It was formerly Arthur Cinema, and they, on their display day, they used that for historic and for to bring the public in. They're fundraising $125,000 to complete purchase of the building. Unless this arrangement changes, there will be needless duplication. Another one, whereas one outfit will be competing with the other. There needs to be a plan. In conclusion, it is important that these Cromwell Museum features get to dovetail into initiatives planned in the vicinity by the Cromwell Heritage Precinct and the Otago Goldfields Heritage Trust. We would not want to get into the dilemma Clyde is in today to have 2 separate historic facilities. The central story is 7.5 kilometres away. We do need to move forwards. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Has anybody got any questions for David? We note that the submission that you've spoken to is quite a lot longer than we have in our agendas, so it may take some time for people to actually have absorbed the information that you've presented.
It is a work in progress, so we're all
so
working on the same direction, hopefully.
Okay, thank you, David, for your time.
Madam Chair, before you proceed, is Mr. Stewart still in the room?
Yes, Mr. Stewart is still in the room.
I just need to correct what I said. I've found the easement he was referring to. Sorry, Gordon. I now know where you were talking about, where it goes to. So thank you for that.
Did you think it would be wrong?
He was just checking.
I bet you were searching your memory banks like I was, saying something makes sense about what he's saying, but I can't find it.
Excuse me. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. That concludes our submission, our submitters to be heard. and takes us to page 17 of our agendas, which is the submissions to the 2023-24 annual plan consultation. Christina, reading this, looking up, not the same people.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Obviously, we'll take the paper as read. Just a very quick comment before the board has some discussions. As you're all aware, there was no formal consultation items that went out as part of the annual plan for the Cromwell Community Board, but today you are to obviously consider what you've heard from the two submissions and the written submissions that were received for the Cromwell Board, and make any recommendations that you wish for consideration in the annual plan. We do have some staff in here that can help around some of the material that is in the written submissions around roading, etc. So we'll hand it over to the board for any questions and discussion.
Any questions and discussion?
Yeah, well, QP's in the room. As council, not community board, has the council got any plans to seal Sandflat Road?
Yes and no. It's on our radar. Just because of the River Terrace development, it has significantly shortened the remaining part that is gravel.
Yeah.
And when you have a short section of gravel road, it's hard to maintain, it's hard to grow, something like that.
Yeah.
One of the challenges is a seal extension potentially would not garnish Waka subsidy. However, we do have some unallocated funding that did not receive Waka subsidy on the council side, still left to allocate through year 3 of the annual plan, and that will be a project put forward as part of that, or alternatively put forward as part of the LTP bid to Waka to see if it would attract funding, and then if not, council would make a call to fully fund that. So you want to contribute to private to contribute more, however it was looked at. If there was any indication of future development, and maybe wait, but yeah, there's options.
Can I add a follow-up to that response?
Yes.
I'm assuming that this submission on Sandflat Road will be going to the council as well, given the council is we have no delegation for roading.
Yep.
Thank you.
You can't see us nodding, can you?
No, you can't see us.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, well, if you stood up, I could. I'm trying to look over the top of my screen and I can't look down on you.
And why we did have it in as part of today is that, of course, if the board was of the mind, you could make a formal recommendation that council consider this as part of the roading program. But as Neil has asked, council consider all submissions, and they will be considering all submissions on the 31st of May.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in my view, Madam Chair, that is part of this process, is that's one submission we should formally resolve as a board that the council does consider. I think the concerns raised by the submitter are quite valid. Whether it meets the hurdles and gets past there and the money's there is another matter. But I think we should certainly resolve that council or recommend to council that they consider including this in the program pretty much as per the staff recommendation, I think, isn't it? Staff comments.
Yeah, so the
Yep.
staff comments, just for people who haven't got them in front of them. CODC currently do not receive any additional subsidised share from the Sultani for seal extension works, nor do we have council funding for this project in the current 3-year funding period. Combination of increased traffic volumes and associated costs to maintain this section of Sandflat Road, a seal extension may be warranted. This will be investigated alongside the development of our funding proposal for the next 3-year period of 2024 to 27, and the project put forward to council for consideration. So that is the staff comments on that, which suggests that that it will be considered. Do we need a further motion that recommends from this board that we would like that to be considered?
Wouldn't hurt.
I've heard Sarah say it wouldn't hurt. Anyone else? Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay. Busy wording.
So while Warren,
While
Wayne's doing that.
Yeah.
Can I note that I think that the staff comments to the other submissions are entirely appropriate, but I've got two observations to make. One, I think, is that Mr. George made a number of submissions in his presentation that were not included in his written submission. I don't think that should be something we get too hung up about at the end of the day, but I think he was speaking to something that he circulated, which
he only circulated one copy, so I'm unfortunately the only person who's got it in front of me. I'm sure that we will get that circulated to the.
And I think.
Yeah, so
I don't think that needs to go forward as part of the annual plan process. That can go into the hall stuff and maybe to the PAG group. But in relation to the submission that Mr. Stewart made about the equestrian club, and I think he said, and I don't think it was in his submission, about he was offering that the equestrian club may be seeking a loan. And I don't think, from what I can see in the submission that's in the agenda, that was actually proposed in there. Is that correct?
Doesn't appear to be.
Yeah. So on that basis, if it's not, I think the staff recommendation is appropriate, and I'm sure as part of that process there will be further dialogue with the equestrian club to take that matter forward. It doesn't necessarily need to be part of this annual plan process, and it could be something that the board ultimately will, if it picks it up, however it's funded, would consider as a one-off.
Yeah, and certainly I think that my comment stands that this is a much more complex issue than there's this many hectares of total land on that site and only this many hectares of ability to irrigate, because there's a lot of question marks around land use, future land use, current land use, and what is actually the racecourse reserve needs as opposed to other activities on the land. And I think that does make this a complex issue and makes thinking about whether we're funding the CLEC's bid to get irrigation or whether that comes as part of further development of that land through other processes is going to be a question there. Yeah, and that's quite a full response from staff there, and there has been quite a lot of engagement with that group over time. It probably just hasn't been in direction that they would like us to be moving in, which is the issue there. Any further things that we need to write, that we need to put a motion about within those submissions?
That's Campbell's track one.
Oh, yeah.
There's the reserve naming policy and going to go to council in the next few months. Can we, is there any reason we can't just get on the front foot and propose during that process that it's Campbell's track? Is there some other overriding process that would prevent that? Is it inappropriate in any way, shape or form? Yeah, because that's all the submission is, right? Is it the naming of it and the sign?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I guess the response there is that we are working towards a naming policy to provide some guidance so it can go out to people. We are getting, I guess if we have one option for names, there's likely others out there as well. And so if we have a good clear process on how that can come into us, that's sort of why the response has been.
So it'd be more appropriate to establish a framework, then consult on the name of it and go ahead that way?
I would suggest so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to give Gordon some comfort, we could say that that's the front runner until proven otherwise. Or do we just stay silent?
Well, the reality is it is the front runner because it's the only name we've had suggested so far, so it has to be.
I mean, that track took a very long time to get to the point where it was completed and opened and was sitting as an item being updated on our governance stuff for a very long time as a monthly coming back up again. And I think that the reasons that it didn't end up with an opening and those sorts of things is because it sort of dragged on for such a long time. It sort of fizzled at the end as to when it was actually going to be opening. That was about fencing contractors, wasn't it? I remember rightly, but probably when we get to the point that there needs to be that we have a name for it, it might be appropriate at that point to actually open the track formally and to have a bit of hoo-ha, because it was something that was worked on over a long period of time. and to actually advertise that it exists and make sure it's there in the promotional material and Cromwell is a good idea. Right, have you
The
got
other
some
track?
emotion? Pardon? Sorry, which was the,
On the Sugarloaf,
yeah,
I just looked up the walking access maps during that discussion, and I thought there was a track that went off Sugarloaf Drive and then parallel with Birchall's Lane and round the back. And like the submission says, around the airstrip. But Neil, were you thinking that it was just along the top of the Sugarloaf?
It's not along the top, and we rerouted it to get access through the trees, because walking around the top of the Sugarloaf as the easement originally went wasn't very appropriate. And then Gordon mentioned there is a track that then takes you back north along the reserve down into Clark Road, where that gold mining relic is, and where the tanks are up the hill close to Clark Road. I'm not sure, and it doesn't seem to show in the survey plans, that anything was put in place to bring a public easement down the current formed access to the cherry orchard. But I think we might need to, the staff I'm sure can work through and find out whether there's anything on the survey maps, and whether, because I'm just looking at quick map and it doesn't seem to show it.
Yeah, and the maps I was looking at showed a gap towards Clark Road like you were originally talking about.
Yeah, but that gap is actually part of the reserve. So that's what Gordon was saying, is that we don't need an easement over it because it's already ours. But I think the staff recommendation covers it, and I think the key thing about what Mr. Stewart was saying is, for goodness sake, get it highlighted. And I think that came up before, and I'm surprised it's not been done already. But actually, got this fantastic asset, and no one knows it's there. Don't know where they can go.
absolutely. And I think that's obviously for both of those tracks that is the case at this point. So yeah, making sure that people can see where the access is, knowing that the tracks exist, and promoting them somehow.
Well, they're not.
They're not, that's quite much fun.
Get them on.
And the other thing is, while there's an easement that shows coming south from the where the east-west track meets the airstrip, it's unclear from the survey maps whether that's the easement that gives access to Dendy's, or whether it's got public access over it as well or not. And I don't know if that's the case, but it needs to be worked through, because if that's the case, then the issue that Gordon has raised has been long-standing. Mark it so people know that it's there, because it's too confusing otherwise, and no one knows where they can go, and they're probably wandering over Mr. Shaw's land and hoping they don't get attacked by some dairy grazing animals.
Any further discussion around the staff comments or issues that we want raised? All right, Wayne has got recommendations up there for us. So A, that the Cromwell Community Board receives the report and accepts the level of significance, acknowledges the submissions to the annual plan 2023-2024, recommends to council to consider including Sandflat Road, Cromwell in its road sealing program. Are there any further ones we need to add with what we've talked about with the other submissions? I think that the discussion, because most of that is about staff moving to do stuff that's already in the background or in process. Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah. Noted. Thank you, David. So can I have a mover and a seconder for recommendations A, B, and C, please? Thank you, Sarah and Cheryl. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Thank you. Right, that takes us to page 21. And the appointment to the project advisory group. Welcome to. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Take the papers ready, but I'd like to make a small amendment. We had a discussion amongst the council staff, and we feel it might be appropriate that we could elect an additional 1 or 2 members if the board feels fit in the PAG. Considering the fact that the town centre is quite a complex project.
Certainly is. So 1 or 2.
Yep.
So. I have had Bob, who was unable to be here today, has indicated that he would be interested in being considered for membership of the town centre PAG. Do we have any other people on our board who are interested in that role? Bruce? And
Yep.
Wally, okay. So of course that makes things a little bit more complex, that we have 3 members who wish to be part of that group. We currently have Nigel as councillor Nigel as a member of the group, as we have a councillor there, and the initial makeup of the group was 1 councillor and 1 community board elected member. But with it saying that we may have 2 additional members, that sort of changes things. So did we have something that wrote what the PAG should look like in the initial report that we received?
It was just a good representation of the board and the council. And I think in this case, I think you're going to get, because there's quite a few board members that are on the council as well, you're going to get that broad overview anyway. So whether there's 2 council members in 1 board member, or 2 board members and 1 council member, I think would make any difference.
Ollie and Sarah, do you want to state the cases?
That's my first or second.
I'll go second, actually.
I think the benefit of 6 months in, I obviously stated just at the first point, and it's possibly polite. I think I've got a good fit in terms of my background for understanding of what the project entails, where it sits, what's able to happen there and what's not, where that's been steered towards, and community board side as well. I think I've got a good foothold on that community reach of where that project's going. I think that's possibly more important at some stages, that we've got somebody that can do that, and I'm willing to say that I think that's me. I think it would be quite good. I appreciate that you're asking for 2, not 1. I think that's great. The more involvement we have, the better, I think, to be honest, and the quicker we can move things along. I think that's really important. So I'm available as and when those workshops come up. I hope to see a lot more of that. But I am available to do that as required. So yeah.
Where's your Wally?
Well, I've got a fair handle on the complexities of the land ownership around town, and the complexities of the verandas. The poles are my bugbear, like probably most people. While the decision-making role as such, worth knowing that I'm a big fan of the civic buildings towards Barrier, whatever that is. And yeah, I've got my head around the fact that it's going to be a pretty staged approach. It's going to be a big job, and it's not going to be delivered overnight. So yeah, it's just how there's so many ways to skin the cat, but yeah, I'm pretty keen to work through those. And yeah, I think I've got some pretty rational methods in figuring out such complex things.
Bob isn't here and in a position to speak to the fact that he would like to be on the
Do you have anything for me?
PAG. No, he just asked if I would bring it up, and I suppose that Bob this is his 2nd term on the board. He's well connected in the community, makes himself available to lots and lots of community groups, as a big advocate for members of the community who are looking for someone to support them bringing items to the board for consideration. Seems to have been one of his real strengths in his term so far, and that he's keen to involve himself in any way. I'm not putting myself there as promoting one or other or any of you. I'm just giving us the opportunity to listen to what Bob might bring to the role. So from the other members, is there any other discussion?
For what it's worth, I think that those that have put their hands up all have good skills and attributes that they could bring to the role. But the big thing I think that's important is that this is a community board initiative. And I think there's a perception from our community that those of us that are on the board because we got elected to councillors aren't real community board members. And we all know that's not the case. But I think that this is a community-driven project. If the numbers stack towards the councillors, it could be seen as being a council-driven process. And sorry, Sarah, I'm not disrespecting your skills and ability in any way, shape, or form, but I think that we've already filled that role from a councillor with Nigel, and I think that whether it's one or two we appoint, and I think two is not a bad idea. I think 2 community board members is the appropriate way to go. So that's my logic, and I think it just makes more sense in my mind.
Yeah, that was I'm sorry, Sarah, like that was absolutely nothing. I agree with Neil, and unfortunately, Nigel does have that councillor seat on the PAG. I'm really thankful. There's 3 of you that have all stepped up because I can't continue doing that role anymore. And I do just agree with Neil that perhaps 2 community board members elected to the community board, especially that Wally was actually elected, have more of a mandate to be there.
When is the contract being awarded for this design work?
We'll bring that paper to the 20th of June.
Joe, did you have anything further to add?
Kind of a bit of a curveball too.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what we were expecting, so that's, yeah.
So that I feel a little bit uncomfortable being caught off guard, really. But I do understand Neil and Mary's logic, and so I tend to agree.
Just thinking out loud, the other thing that we could do in this instance is look at appointing a community board member today and then have time to think about a second member when we come to the report that's coming to us in June.
Absolutely.
That's a possibility that we could take the paper as it is in the agenda today, appoint a member as a community board member to the PAG, and then take time to consider the other appointment.
Whether we add one or not.
Yeah. Whether we add an additional person to that.
So would that be the next community board meeting that would come back?
Yeah, we can bring that back. Yeah.
I must admit I've been more comfortable with that because that is a curveball.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't thinking about that. And so to just, it's just arrived on our lap five minutes ago. I'd rather actually have a wee think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes making decisions on the fly isn't necessarily the best way to go.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good way of doing it. While my logic sounds sound, the reality is sometimes who said you make a decision on the fly with what your first reaction is, and then you go, oh, maybe that wasn't quite so right. So I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Then I would like to propose within this room at the moment that Wally is the person who moves on to the PAG as per the report in front of us, and that we can consider that second appointment at a June meeting, which also gives Bob the opportunity to be at the meeting, and for Sarah for us to consider as well. But at the moment, appointing a community board member is what we're here to do, and I think we've got the skills and probably the community connections as well. We've both got some really good attributes there in terms of community connections and skill set that would bring a lot of value to this project. That's my opinion. So, any further thinking? Sarah's not going to agree with me, but
I don't disagree with the reasoning, but I think the only thing I'd have to say is that obviously it's me that is in that position only. I think I would hope to be seen as a clear advocate for the community board. And when it's appropriate, I put a community board out, and when it's appropriate, I put a council out. And I do understand there is a conflict there sometimes where you're making a decision. But I think that's something that we're all very well aware of, and I would hope that I would be sitting to be able to do that. And certainly, community board advocating for Cromwell as a community, not just as a reason, is something I'm passionate about. Yeah.
And I'll just say that I'm quite happy to work with Sarah or Bob, and I'd prefer someone else, to be honest, as well, to work with and bounce ideas off and level the thinking at times.
But you'll have Nigel as well.
Yeah, there's Nigel as well, but more the merrier. Yes.
There's a lot of people. Might even get to cozy up with them. Right, ho. So the recommendation, if everybody is ready for me to do that, is that Wally Sanford be appointed to the project advisory group for the Cromwell Town Centre project. So we have recommendation A, receiving a report and accepting the level significance, and B, decides that Wally Sanford should be appointed to the project advisory group for the Cromwell Town Centre project. Do we need a C that says the board will consider a third member of the PAG at its next meeting?
If
No.
you wish, that's fine.
Don't need to have it?
No, I reckon it'll be in Gareth's next report in June. We'll cover it then. That way it's,
He's written that down, he knows what he's doing.
Yep.
Perfect. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Wally. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Righty ho, that takes us to page 23, which is the date of our next meeting, which is 20 June 2020. Closed. Thank you, everybody. 2:45. More. 3 minutes late. 3 minutes.